Journey to Revolution.
Let's review some of the events leading up to the Revolution of 1776.
The Proclamation of 1763 forbids settlement west of the crest of the Appalachians in hopes of avoiding more Native American conflicts and keeping the settlers close to the coast and easier to control.
The Quartering Act of 1765 required colonists to feed and provide public housing for British soldiers. The delicious-sounding Sugar Act of 1764 undeliciously taxed certain goods imported by the colonists.
Protest against the Sugar Act was half-hearted, but it rose after the passage of the Stamp Act in 1765, which set stiff tariffs on almost every type of printed material. This affected almost all of the well-educated elites, merchants, planners, lawyers, and the media.
Like today, newspapers and pamphlets had great influence on people's opinions. So when the British passed the Stamp Act, they enraged an elite able to argue eloquently and with the power to spread their ideas through the press.
Another issue that the colonists had was no representation in Parliament. In October 1765, the colonists held a Stamp Act Congress, gathered to discuss their grievances. Representatives from the colonies got to know each other and saw that they could work together.
A boycott of the Stamp Act ensued, followed with a boycott of all English goods. Britain repealed the Stamp Act while declaring it still had the power to tax the colonies.
A year later, in 1767, Britain reignited protests with a set of new taxes called the Townshend Acts. One of these acts was an indirect customs tax, which Britain thought would be more palatable to the colonies than a direct tax. Nope. Protest was especially strong in the merchant regions of New England. Another boycott followed, and the British sent in 4,000 troops to Boston to protect loyalist merchants and other interests.
British soldiers and Boston do not mix. In March 1770, an angry mob, is there any other type, began whacking a small group of British soldiers with sticks. The soldiers, fearing for their lives, fired into the crowd, killing 5 people.
Anti-British agitator Samuel Adams named this event the Boston Massacre and made sure all of Boston knew about it. It is estimated over half of the population of Boston marched in the funeral of the men shot, now martyrs in their deaths.
The British quickly repealed the Townshend Acts and pulled out their soldiers, bringing about a relative calm for a few years.
That calm ended with the Tea Act of 1773. The Tea Act allowed the British East India Company, which was near collapse and needed money, to ship directly to the colonies. This tea, even after a tax, would be cheaper than the smuggled but non-tax tea the colonists were buying from the Dutch.
Buying British tea would mean that colonists would accept Parliament's right to tax them, an idea many of them resisted. But this was about money too. American merchants would have been hurt financially by the change. The colonies decided to prevent British tea ships from docking in their ports, creating a potential crisis.
More tea parties followed suit in other cities. King George decided enough was enough. The die is now cast. The colonies must either submit or triumph. Well, that was his speechwriter. His original line was,
Oh, no, you didn't.
Parliament retaliated with 4 harsh acts known as the Coercive Acts, designed to make an example out of Boston, the center for revolutionary activity. One of these acts was to close Boston's port to all trade until they paid for the tea they dumped. Wasn't going to happen. The acts inflamed resistance and strengthened colonial unity.
A 5th act, the Quebec Act, extended the province of Quebec to the Ohio River, set up an autocratic government, and established Roman Catholicism as the official religion in the area. The colonists called these 5 acts the Intolerable Acts. Guess how they felt about them.
The First Continental Congress gathered in September 1774 to plan a unified response against these new measures. In all but the formal sense, the Revolutionary War had started.